Assalamu alaikum. Before we start this video, I just want to note that the answer really here is that no, Islam is not a cult. I'm going to be breaking everything down here in the video, and it's really important to know the signs of a cult to make sure that you don't end up under someone else's control and that your love of God and your faith remains pure for God and for you. But I do want to note that there are some cults that do follow or claim to follow Islam, but anybody anywhere can be a cult. Any religion, any group, any idea or way of life can turn into a cult. So we're going to learn how to identify those, but I want to let you guys know that just because you're a Muslim, it does not mean that you're in a cult. Islam is not a cult, but we are going to learn how to identify those. So keep watching to find all of the ways that you can identify a cult and how to get out of it. Welcome to Muslims for Progressive Values. I'm your host, Kendra Cordova. Today we're going to be talking about the question I've been asked recently: is Islam a cult? So it's important to note that just because somebody follows a religion does not mean that they follow a cult, and cults don't have to be religiously based. We're going to learn a little bit about that today. But I find this stuff fascinating. I'm working on a second master's right now in clinical mental health counseling. So the way that people's minds work, it's very interesting. And then also being somebody who studies, religious studies and works here with MPV, this is a really important topic. We're going to be taking a look at this using Steven Hassan's BITE model of authoritarian control. So the BITE model was created by Steven Hassan, who is a psychologist. He has worked in helping to deconstruct people and deprogram people out of cults. He has done research and study and putting out scholarly information about cults for decades now. It's for the main part of his career. So he has what is called the BITE model, and that's going to stand for behavioral control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. So all religions are going to have at least a tiny drop of some sort of cult-ishness to them. And that is mostly because there is this idea of trying to decipher right from wrong. And a lot of people are going to be following the same sorts of patterns or the same expressions or the same prayer rituals. And so to some people it might come across culty, but what we're going to notice here is that the difference between a religion and a cult, or just something you really love and a cult, is really going to be this undercurrent of this or else. There's a threat behind a cult. There's going to be a threat of being disowned or banished or whatever from your group. There's this fear that they use of potential violence, fear of being alone, fear of damnation. It's fear-based control, whereas somebody making a choice based on the things that they've learned and experienced and believe in and use critical reasoning and whatever to get there. Those are two completely different things. So we're going to take a look at what makes something that or else, right? So this model was created by Steven Hassan, BITE model of authoritarian control. So the first one that is going to be seen is called behavior control. So behavior control can start as something mild or small, but again, as it escalates into this threatening or else thing, it really becomes very invasive, it becomes very manipulative, and it's not there for the right reasons. I saw a quote recently, I think it was by the Dalai Lama, and it said, religion is supposed to be a way to control or reflect on your own actions, not a way to control other people. So again, we're talking about this. Is this a personal thing, or is this a forced thing? Behavior control can start with anything from the way a person dresses, the way a person cuts their hair, the way what a person is allowed to eat, when you're supposed to sleep, when you're supposed to wake up, when you need to be at this one specific place, the body language, tone of voice, things you're allowed to say or not say, who you are allowed to talk to, who you are allowed to converse with, where you are allowed to go, and when you're allowed to go there. Prayer rituals, ritualistic actions can also be a form of behavior control. But again, we need to look at this like darker undercurrent. So just because somebody, let's say, let's use an Islamic example, and then I'll give you some examples from non-Islamic sources that I have experienced as well. So, for example, if we're talking about a woman who wears a hijab, right, or a niqab or burqa or any of those more like modest Islamic, related outfits. If she's doing it because she believes that God asked her to, if she's doing it because it brings her closer to her faith, if it makes her more comfortable, if she prefers modesty, if whatever that positive reason where it's about her or her and God, this is going to be just a choice that she makes in practicing her faith. However, it becomes behavior control when there's a threat on the other side of it. For example, what happened with Mahsa Amini and many other women in societies or groups or families like that, where it's not, I'm wearing this hijab or this headscarf or this outfit because it's important to me in my faith, but because if I don't, I will be assaulted or killed or threatened or kicked out of the house or, excommunicated. Like there is a threat on the other side of it. So if somebody's doing something for a threatening reason or not for the right reason on the inside, that's going to be where this cult mentality comes from. And this goes into policing each other. So it's not just even on yourself. Behavior control teaches you to police other people. So when you see like the haram police in comments and stuff all over the place, they're acting in a very cultish way here because they have been taught that there's black and white thinking. There's good and bad people. There are things you have to do and things you absolutely cannot do. And there's no nuance. Cultish thought is extremely black and white. There is absolutely no wiggle room or nuance. It doesn't even occur to them to think that. And then there's also this othering of people, which is part of that behavior control, where you are going to start to look at people as others. You're going to start to try to separate yourself from them, look down upon, and even be like warned away from. We've talked about this also previously where I said, if you have truth or you know what you believe, there's really no reason for you to not have contact with certain people because they think differently than you. If you're convinced that the world is a sphere and the world is round, it doesn't matter how many flat earthers you talk to if you know that this is something that is true for you, right? Or, it's true, but you know what I mean? I'm just saying, you can't just automatically be swayed because you talk to somebody who has some different worldview than yourself, especially something scientific like that. But even just getting into non-scientific, let's talk about the way that we view other people and our faith and our, just beliefs about others, right? Just because me or someone else, if you read a neo-Nazi book or something, you're not automatically just going to turn into one, right? If you can be swayed that easily, then what you lack is actually just critical thinking skills and the ability to do this analysis of where am I getting this information from? What does it mean? And so, again, there's no reason for you to not have contact with certain people because you're afraid that they're just going to sway you away from your faith. This is a threat that is used to keep everybody on the inside, to keep them scared and to make sure that they don't talk to other people. So an example of this is that, as you guys know, I was raised in the Catholic Church. And when I was in middle school, one of the priests came in. So as some of you guys know, I was raised in the Catholic Church. There's an example of this othering of people that I experienced. I also was sent to Catholic school for many years. You're going to notice that a lot of cultish groups are going to have their own schools. And that's going to be because they want to start the information and behavioral control starting at a young age. So when I was in middle school, I still remember just being baffled by the fact that this happened. We had a priest that came in to talk to us, and he had told us that we cannot be friends with non-Catholics, even other Christians. We shouldn't even be friends with other Christians because they will lead us away from the true faith. So we have to go tell all of our non-Catholic friends we're not their friend anymore. This is a form of behavior control and information control as well. Another example of this is that I have some friends that are or were Mormons and part of the LDS group. Mormonism and LDS is structured very much like a cult, right? So they have like the head and then it breaks off, and people have, there's a lot of internal monitoring in those groups. So I had friends that were Mormon, and their Facebook was monitored, right? And they would get called into their ward to go talk to their elders. A ward is like the church of that area, like your specific local group, right? And they would be called to talk to the elders about, why are you friends with this person? You either need to unfriend them or convert them. So again, this is behavior control. They're going to teach you to look at other people as good or bad, and you get to judge evil or good, and then black and white, and others are bad, and we're the only good ones, right? That's behavior control. They're starting to teach you to notice those things. The second type of control is information control. So information control means that you are only allowed to read certain books, look at certain news. So they will tell you that you can only like listen to certain radio stuff, music. They're going to control music you can and can't listen to. They're going to control news you're allowed to know or watch or listen to. The only teachers or people you're allowed to ask questions to. Only, they'll tell you things like only these higher up or these certain scholars or these certain people have the knowledge, and you don't get to have the knowledge because you're not as pure or as, studious or perfect or whatever as they are, right? And so you have to go through people to get information, and then they control the information that they give you. I use the Catholic example because I was raised in it for decades and decades. But that was sort of like what happened in the Middle Ages, where, only the priestly class spoke Latin or understood Latin, and then they would do the mass in Latin, and they were the only ones that could tell you what the Bible said, because most people were illiterate or couldn't read it. And that's sort of like where some of that information control is like, you have to get the facts from me, and you can't go to anybody else. I had an example of this in Islam, where early on after my conversion to Islam, that I was talking to a local imam, and he didn't know me, and I get that, but like I was asking about what are some good books on some of these certain topics. I'd love to read them, and he was like, oh well, you should only read the ones that I tell you to read. Make sure you don't read any of those other ones, because anybody could write a book, and I don't want you to get the wrong information. And of course, he probably didn't know that, like, I can do the rhetorical analysis, but still, it's a weird thing to tell somebody, like, only listen to the stuff I tell you to, and anything else is wrong, and you shouldn't listen to it. It's very odd. So information control is going to come like that. Depending on the level of information control, that, is going to get into some of that, like, how culty is this? Because, of course, we do want to focus on truth and all of that. But again, you shouldn't really have to limit information, because if you have the right answers, it doesn't matter how many wrong answers you read, right? So being able to do the critical thinking and analyze pieces and understand them, anybody can do that. I've said that a million times. You don't have to be some special person to learn how to do that. We talk in Islam, it's ijtihad, right? The ability to understand and come to conclusions based on your own understanding. That's the thing. So they try to limit this so that the only information and things come from them. This is also a way to keep people very dependent. So having to depend on other people for your information at all times, including like how the world works. Anything from like sex to money and how to deal with money and getting jobs and just anything. If you need information and they control all of it, or they'll say only this one scholar or only this one person has the truth, and you can only go to them, and they limit it until you don't have the ability to even think of anything else because you never heard of anything else. That's information control. The next one is thought control. So thought control is extremely powerful, and cults need this. Cults need this in order to control. So regardless of what group you're in, if there's this form of thought control, you should definitely have a red flag going up. The way that thought control works is that you're going to have people that are going to be in charge, but they can't run everybody all the time. So what they teach you how to do through this thought control is self-policing, basically thought stopping. So anytime you start to have a question about something, they're gonna like change it to use some of those logical fallacies I talked about in a previous video. So if you have these thoughts, then they're considered impure, or you have questions, right? And you have these like thoughts, and it's like, oh, who are you to question God? You know, telling you that some of your thoughts are evil and some of your thoughts are good, making sure that if you think anything that might pull you from the group, right, that is immediately like cut down, like you're not allowed to have that. So thought control is going to be a lot of just like stopping yourself from asking questions, stopping yourself from, you know, thinking of why. Well, why do I pray this way? Why do we really focus on this one scripture? Like, you should want to know more and learn things and have all of these thoughts going on. But when you're in a cult or a very cultish group, they're going to limit that. They can also limit it by taking your time. So by making you busy all the time. Some like churches or cults, right? You're there 4, 5, 6 hours a day on top of whatever you're already doing, right? You don't really have the time to ask questions. You don't have the time to get that information or to have those thoughts. And they'll start, like I said, teaching you that your thoughts are impure, so that if you start to think a certain way, you will stop yourself from going down that road of questions, right? And using thought-stopping cliches, right? Like, well, only God knows, or again, who are you to question God? Or, well, this happened to you because you must have done something wrong. So now anytime anything bad happens to you, your thoughts are immediately going to go into, I need to do better in this cult. I need to repent. I need to, right? And again, yes, there's healthy guilt, but this is like, you cannot think any free thoughts. Free thoughts are bad. Free questions are bad. We can't do that, right? And again, there's this or else. What happens is that they're going to start threatening you with things like pulling you in to see the elders, right? Pulling you in to talk to you and question you on why you're thinking this way and tell you how you're wrong and shame you back into it. Or say that if you ask those kind of questions, you are a disbeliever. If you're a disbeliever, then we're going to shun you. If you ask questions, like I've seen some people even in Islam, like ask some questions and there'll be a scholar that's like, are you stupid? Immediately trying to shut them down for having those thoughts in the first place. And if that happens to you for years and years over and over, eventually you will just stop yourself, right? They don't have to stop you. You'll just stop yourself. And so that thought control is one of those parts. And then the last one, the most powerful, the foundation of all of this control, actually comes from the E, which is emotional control. If you guys have seen K-pop Demon Hunters, or you're a fan of it like my family is, you know what this is. If you have not seen that, I know it's a weird ask, but if you have not seen that, please go watch the video for the song in there called Your Idol. Your Idol is a perfect example of these kinds of controls, and it works on the emotional control there as well. Some of the lines in there are, don't you know that I'm trying to save you, right? Keep all the shame inside, right? I can be your guide, right? You have all of this like darkness inside of you, but don't worry, I'm the only one who will love you through this. But you have to follow me because nobody else is ever gonna love you, but I do, and I see you, and you can only be good through me, right? So this is how you get that emotional control. There's also this like threat. There's always an underlying threat, okay? So the number one thing that they use is fear. Cults use fear. Fear of damnation, fear of not being good enough, fear of doing something wrong. And you are constantly fed this fear all the time until you are afraid of everything. You are afraid of your own thoughts. You are afraid of the outside world and other people. You're afraid to ask questions. You're afraid to get close to God in any other way, right? Than the way that they specifically tell you that you have to at all times. So they're just gonna say like, do it or else. They're going to feed you things like, well, if you think those things or say those things, you're going to hell. And not just because, oh, you hurt someone, it's like, oh, you had a thought. And it immediately goes into fear of excommunication, fear of being disowned, fear of being judged, fear of being alone, fear of potential physical threats, fear of monetary threats. They'll take all your money. Maybe they keep you dependent on them by having all of your money with that group, right? And so eventually the reason you start doing things is because of fear. So another example of this is going to be Rabia. the early Sufi scholar and poet. She's very popular, but she's most popular for expressing this idea that you shouldn't be trying to avoid hell as your reason for doing things, and you also shouldn't just be trying to get to heaven as your reason for doing things. It should just be because of your awe and love for God and nothing else. It shouldn't be about personal gain or personal loss. And that's what happens in these cults. The cults make it that the only reason you're doing this stuff is so that you don't go to hell, or so that God doesn't punish you because you're terrible and you're awful and you should be full of guilt, right? Or they start to use it in that opposite way, that black and white thinking of only we are perfect and only we are good and all of those other people are bad and you have to keep doing what we're telling you to do or else God hates you, right? Like, anybody even really knows what God thinks about somebody? We talk about that in the hadith, right? In the hadith qudsis and some of those other hadiths we've talked about, where, you know, like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, God does not look to your face or to your clothes. God looks to your heart and to your deeds, right? And that nobody knows but God. Nobody knows what someone will be judged but God. There are those hadiths that are very harsh about that kind of stuff, saying like, if one of you calls the other one a disbeliever, then one of you is right. Meaning that if you call somebody a disbeliever who's not, right, you are automatically considered, you know, a disbeliever because you are judging in the place of God. And that is what these cults do, is they are immediately going to use fear. And you have to usually follow this one specific person. So it's going to be a specific religious individual. It's going to be a specific author. It's going to be a specific teacher. It's going to be a specific person. And you're never allowed to question those people. And if you question those people, those threats start coming up. If you do something that's different from us, you ask too many questions, right? Then there's those threats coming up. So again, Islam is not a cult. Islam is a religion. And if you're following it for the right reasons, and it is something you believe, you read that Quran and it's special and you believe it and you have that connection with God and you're doing your salah prayers and it's something that means a lot to you, that it doesn't make it a cult. But if any of those other things that we just talked about are the reason you're in it, or are the way that you have been treated within it, then yes, you are in a cultish group. That's not all Muslims. That's not all Islam. But it happens. It happens in every faith, in every type of group around the world. And so that is the answer here. Is Islam a cult? No. But can Islam be used as a cult? Yes, it can, just like anything else. Hopefully, understanding some of that stuff that we talked about today is going to help you in the future, for you to better understand the world around you, make informed decisions, and, you know, allow yourself to ask questions, to learn, to grow, and to find faith for the right reasons. Find faith for the sake of faith. Find God for the sake of God and for nobody else. So don't forget to like and subscribe. You can donate zakat money to help the progressive groups around the world through mpbusa.org. We also have a publishing branch now, which is why you guys don't see me that often anymore. I'm focusing on some of that stuff more. So we are going to be having nonfiction authors and fiction authors coming out here in the next year. If you are an author and you would like to submit some of your work, you can submit it to publisher@mpbusa.org. And inshallah, I will see you in the next video. Bye.